we have customer-driven digital digital transformation from HSBC, typically based in the UK, and today directly from Poland, we have Dr. Artur Preus, Senior Business Architect of Digital Transformation at HSBC. Dr. Artur, please turn on your camera and join us. I'll do a brief introduction. Artur Preus is an accomplished client's lifecycle business architect and target operating model professional with over 15 years of practice experience, primarily in the finance industry. He has experience in designing strategic business architecture and operating models, acting as a single point of contact for the transformation teams, and ensuring business principles are appropriately embedded into the project, delivering expected outcomes. He's an expert in the business architecture and business model design frameworks. He has worked in organizations in the UK, the United States, Poland, Germany, and Singapore. He is an active member of the Business Architecture Guild, the International Compliance Association, and the Center for Financial Professionals. Dr. Artur Preus, it's a real pleasure to have you with us, and we very much look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Joseph, for a nice introduction. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here and talk to you all. I hope you can see and hear me clearly. My name is Artur Preus, as just said. I'm a senior business architect currently at HSBC, working for global banking and markets line of business, where I'm looking after the strategic business architecture that part of the bank is currently implementing as a part of the huge digital transformation. The item I wanted to present today during the next 30 minutes or so is on how HSBC is transforming its business services and processes in order to adjust them to the changing client expectations and to make them available where and when clients will want them to be available. Today, this obviously requires digitization of data and digitalization of processes. We are going to talk mainly about business clients rather than retail customers, but I'm pretty much sure that the principles we'll be discussing can be applied to both segments. Keep in mind this assumption, please, especially when I will be providing you with the context of what business services for global banking and markets used to be and how they've evolved since or still are evolving, as this is something I'm pretty much sure is a never-ending story. Before we will discuss details of how HSBC is transforming client-related processes, let's pause for a moment and take a step back to understand the wider picture of forces which are standing behind HSBC transformation. And I'm pretty much sure lots of other transformations, similar initiatives across the globe. To do this, we are going to talk about key challenges that today's banks and other financial organizations are facing, as well as key questions they need to be aware of and answer in order to stay competitive and further develop their footprint. It's been already said here multiple times during the last few days that the financial services industry is currently undergoing another radical shift. That radical shift mainly is in the form of digital transformation, which is driven by, for example, things like new competition from fintechs, changes in regulatory environment, or raising disruptive technologies. That digital experience that fintechs especially are using as a key competitive differentiator means for clients to be able to get what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. It means that clients, for example, are not to be bothered if it's not necessarily required. But if they need to be bothered, clients are able or should be able to use channels they want to or prefer to use without the need of going, for example, to the local branch or meeting the bank representatives, which what's become important, especially now in the era of global pandemic. This approach is forcing traditional financial organizations to rethink the way how they do their business. Challenge which I personally find interesting and very common is that many banks and financial organizations today often use outdated business management applications and or siloed systems, and that those antiquated tools make them unable to keep up with today's increasingly digital-first world. Without a solid forward-thinking technological foundation, these organizations can miss out on the current evolution, where digital transformation is not just a good idea, it's become imperative for survival. All of these challenges, which we discussed, so you can see on the screen on the left-hand side, lead to important questions all financial organizations have to be able to answer in order to determine next steps and in order to stay afloat. Let's take a look at some of those questions now. The first one, can financial institutions adapt to disruption in financial services? The accelerating pace of technological advancement in financial services are creating opportunities to serve clients in new ways, completely new ways. Financial institutions seem to be in this area in a pretty much good position, with massive customer bases, strong balance sheets, and substantial amounts of capital to invest. On the other side, though, as we said, they feel threat not only from new startup, but also from large-scale technology platforms. Think about Apple, think about Samsung as an example, which are also trying to enter into that financial services. It is fairly easy for these huge services and service providers to offer banking and insurance across the networks, with which comprises of billions sometimes of consumers. Another important question is, can massive institutions transform their businesses? Some incumbents may struggle to respond to the pace of change in financial services, yet they have to adopt some of the best aspects, at least, of fintech startup and tech companies if they are to remain competitive. Fintechs are winning market share by providing ease of access and cheaper, more flexible services. For incumbents to do those things, they need to make organizational changes to culture and the operations. Some incumbents are changing the way they think about their organizations, including adopting methods common in tech companies and startups, such as agile project management, DevOps, or sprints. Though they cannot embrace the move fast and break things culture of the technology sector, incumbents are changing or trying to change internal structures so that required changes and adoptions can get done more quickly. They, for example, create separate organizations or brands that offer more flexibility and put an effort to change organizational culture to make it more flexible and open to innovation. As part of that culture change forced by fintechs, those, let's say, new kids on the block, most incumbents even decided to, and this is unbelievable for them, increase their tolerance for risk in order to encourage innovative thinking. And the last question, can financial service providers increase inclusion? New business models make it feasible for financial services or to bring those financial services to those who previously have been seen as a commercial unreachable. In particular, the widespread adoption of mobile devices and self-service internet platforms has opened up new distribution channels, bringing many new consumers into the formal financial system. Advances in technology have significantly lowered the cost to reach to these new customers or clients, meaning that financial inclusion can be a source of growth for both traditional and new players. Now, having in mind key challenges and questions we've just talked about, the following question may arise. What an organization should do to keep up and to become a leader in today's client-driven and digitally oriented world. Research on digitization produced by one of the biggest consulting companies answered this question with three main findings. First, the leaders have to understand the importance of a digital strategy. Second, the organizations have to develop and establish more agile operating models. And most notably, third one, they have to tackle the need for internal culture shifts. As more customers today, also large businesses, use mobile platforms to do their banking, a seamless omni-channel experience has become a crucial aspect of digital strategy that banks and financial organizations must adopt. This going forward will certainly mean fewer physical branches, for example, and more mobile services with a client experience that is both complementary and consistent in all or across all channels. As one person said, banks think in channels, but customers don't. And financial service organizations have to understand that organizational silos pose a significant obstacles to creating a consistent experience. It requires not only understanding what customers or clients want, but also looking inward and changing on organizational beliefs and habits to be able to facilitate required innovations. We have already highlighted that the importance of innovating culture, which may be difficult to introduce, especially for already established incumbents. Open innovation and ecosystems are the genesis of design and delivery in the digital era. The market is moving fast, as we know, and to lead the race requires a highly efficient technological capabilities, which are becoming a main differentiator when it comes to improving the client experience also. And this trend has already caused the banks to open up the systems or middleware layers to third parties and use of open APIs. All of a sudden, co-creation and collaboration with other organizations for the good of the clients has become the new mantra in the financial services world. Another important element, as well as expected outcome of digital transformation, is flexibility and agility that nowadays is so much talked about and is commonly understood as we need to move faster and transform quicker. But it does not mean that having only short vision is enough or should be enough for any organization. Conversely, we should say, a clear long-term vision and short-term execution is something what is required in order to succeed. Perhaps the most important and indeed the most difficult change that the traditional banks and financial organizations have to implement is a mindset change, though. The digital age is fundamentally impacting culture as it forces those organizations to shift from a product-centric point of view to a client-centric one. From a place where the current IT setup is doing the job to a tech-savvy mindset, and from planning cycles to test and learn approach. And to do this in the right way, banks and financial organizations must put themselves into their client's shoes and understand what their clients want, rather than think that they can or what they can or may offer to them. Let's imagine for a moment what may go through some clients' minds when they experience a journey at their banks that can take days or even weeks. They might be thinking this: why doesn't my bank work like Amazon? And those clients who think this are apt to think that their banks have had ample time to figure out why and what Amazon or other leading players are doing in this or other industry, and why they are doing this right, in order to also take this approach and emulate it. In order to succeed in the digital transformations, banks and other financial organizations need to determine what matters most at critical points in the client journey, which, by the way, is going to vary greatly between different client segments, and then work relentlessly to improve that experience. The end goal might be to completely digitize journey from start to finish in order to provide a rapid, for example, onboarding process and ensure that clients are able to use banking products as soon as possible. Not only does a digitized and automated journey make clients happy, it also frees up staff for more valuable tasks or activities like cross-selling and relationship building, while simultaneously saving the financial institution money by streamlining processes. That's obviously a triple win. Now, with all that in mind, let's talk practice. This will be about HSBC taking the digital and client-driven approach to reinvent its client's experience and reduce its operating costs in the same time. Before we'll talk the details, first, I'm going to put this part of our conversation into the right context, which I hope will be helpful in understanding of what that digital transformation details are and where we're kind of coming from. As I mentioned at the beginning, the part of the bank I'm currently working for as a business architect is global banking and markets. Its clients are mainly large corporates, as well as financial institutions and public sector companies or entities, with banks, central banks, asset managers, insurers, and hedge funds. HSBC offers them a full range of banking products. For example, corporate banking services in credit and rates, foreign exchange, equities, money markets, fund administration, assessment in mergers and acquisitions, and debt and equity, capital raising, and many, many more. Global Banking Markets develops its products, sell them, and deliver them to their clients. It uses support of so-called business services function in order to onboard new clients and their products, to maintain existing client data required for risk and compliance reasons, as well as to offboard or exit existing clients in case of either commercial, reputational, or financial crime risk cause. For many years, business services were operating with a hugely segregated and separated, or siloed, so to speak, set of its services that are being employed in order to onboard and maintain GBM clients. As a result, onboarding process has been very painful for both the bank and its new clients, but especially for new clients. In worst case scenarios, it was taking up to 3 months to onboard a complex multi-jurisdictional clients. Easy to imagine that that wasn't the best experience for new to bank clients that the bank was happy with. Additionally, due to the nature of processes that financial organizations need to adopt, as you know, to meet risk and regulatory requirements, as well as due to inefficiencies in HSBC operating model, onboarding of a new client, as well as periodic reviews of existing data, required multiple interactions with clients performed by multiple banks' representatives in order to obtain needed data and documentation. Believe me, a real nightmare for the corporate and institutional clients, especially that all of them deal or make businesses with other partners or vendors, providing them with a much more seamless services and products they need. So it was easy for them to compare and simply ask, why doesn't HSBC work like Amazon or like any other company or vendor I'm dealing with? Functions then that belong to business services like KYC, know your customer or client, credit or regulatory classification, obviously had an access to both internal and external data sources. But rather than fully utilize them and fully benefit from the data they offer, they still relied on data and documentation provided mainly by the client himself. One of the main reasons for this was because external data sources were integrated on a point-by-point basis with HSBC systems. This has created a highly ineffective and hard to maintain network of IT connections. Nobody was able to comprehend and understand if the data obtained from those sources could be indeed or should be trusted. Similar situation applied to internal banking systems and data they provided, as bank utilizes many different so-called core banking systems across the world. And unfortunately, there is no standardized set of data that could be obtained or received from those systems. Very interesting and proved to be painful for the clients and expensive for HSBC. Part of the as-is operating model you can see on the screen from the very high level, obviously, point of view, was the fact that all client onboarding and maintenance cases have to be manually orchestrated and coordinated by so-called client managers. Somebody who was sitting on the top of sometimes very complex and complicated processes, and who needed to understand what's required, trigger and orchestrate business services functions responsible for execution of, for example, onboarding and maintenance processes, chase them up in case of delays, feed them with required additional data received or obtained from the client or other available data sources, as well as at the end to confirm completion of the case. Big issue all the time and huge inefficiency, especially if you are trying to do this without a proper workflow system, and you have to switch between multiple different systems without access to real-time status data, as well as without clearly stated and committed to service level agreements that everyone stick to no matter what. To be fair with HSBC, it has tried for many years to close those gaps and fix all those issues in order to improve both client experience and organizational efficiency. One by one, functions responsible for onboarding activities, so entity data management, KYC, credit, legal, product and service setup, and others, have been changing their operating models and systems, aiming to improve what they do and deliver better client experience. What was lacking in all these efforts was overarching and strategic end-to-end model that could guide their decisions to ensure that they are or they were moving into one and right direction, where ultimately not only their respective objectives or have been delivered, but also wider view of business outcomes could be addressed. And where end-to-end client experience obviously could be elevated to the highest possible level. This fortunately has changed last year. So even before the pandemic, which in turn has massively accelerated planned transformation, business services management has finally realized that the whole organization needs to be brought together, and that the client journey rather than any internal functions, perspectives, or objectives has to be a driving force for the next transformation chapter this organization will be going through. The digital transformation of business services in global banking and markets started with a new strategic vision, completely stripped of any existing technology constraints. We decided to put away what we already knew about this organization, and obviously knowing regulatory and risk requirements, asks ourselves what would the good, what the best look like. With this in mind, we've come up with a strategic business architecture model, and the key objective was to support the ideal client journey. Once agreed and approved by all, it's laid a foundation for all the transformation work that is currently undergoing. Our key objective was that the target business architecture should enable a seamless client journey and a reduction of internal efforts and costs where possible. Our key guiding principles, design principles, were following. Changes must be looked at and assessed and decided from end-to-end client journey perspective. Client should be able to use a self-service platform to raise a request for example, new product or updated data, observe case status, provide additional data or documents, and be notified of case completion. The portal should allow client to interact with the bank representatives in case some help or support might be required using collaboration tools like chat or FAQ section. There should be also availability to integrate client system with the bank application so that client could use his own tools and systems to perform some of all activities available also in the bank's platform. Data should be at the center of transformation and drive all decisions around data model, the processes of getting and storing data, as well as data sources. Cases where client interactions will be required should be taking place on an exceptional basis. Any client outreach should be limited to the necessary minimum, with all required data obtained from either internal or external trusted, so-called trusted data sources. There should also be a fully automated case orchestration process responsible for case creation, case initiation, case coordination with downstream case fulfillment functions, as well as for aggregation of multiple requests for client data before providing client with a single data request. Teams which until now have been responsible for a manual case orchestration should be dedicated to more complex cases where manual interventions might be still required. All these design principles and objectives determined with regards to their strategic vision of how business services will operate in the future have been widely discussed with all impacted internal stakeholders, but not only, also with HSBC clients. We asked HSBC clients what the perfect journey is for them. We wanted to understand how, for example, the client portal should work in order to meet their expectations. In result, they helped us to understand that when using portal, clients wouldn't want to be asked to provide documents if the content of those documents could be digitized, so that rather than completing soft copies, scanning them and uploading into the portal, clients could get access to electronic forms and key the data into them. This obviously creates a brilliant opportunity to create an entirely new end-to-end flow with digitized data provided by the client at the initial stage, data being automatically distributed to all interested parties and stored in their respective systems without a hassle. Another interesting element of the revolution we plan to introduce is in the data area, which is to change the way how trusted data sources will be utilized. Rather than connecting every business services system to external or internal data sources on a point-by-point basis, there will be so-called data aggregator set up. Its key role will be to aggregate data from external and internal trusted data sources that duplicate that data, quality check, and ensure that there are no gaps, and only then distribute all that data to all respective downstream systems, thus also becoming a single trusted data source for all other systems. This process will apply to both new data that needed to be acquired in result of new client onboarding, as well as to for existing data where there can be some updates that the bank needs to be aware of. Before any implementation or more detailed design work has been commenced, we have determined perfect client journeys first. This happened to make sure that all our design and implementation decisions will be driven from the client point of view. At that point, we already had an existing service catalog, which proved to be very helpful. It's been built around client lifecycle. So we knew exactly what journeys our clients are going through and what core internal and external capabilities need to be employed in order to support those journeys. This knowledge was extremely, as I said, helpful when we were building our perfect journeys, especially when we needed to determine some of which of those existing capabilities will or should stay as they are going forward, but also which of those components will have to change or be changed in result of digitalization, or even which one of them will have to get demised as the digital transformation would make them obscure. Once determined and built, that client journeys are now being used to drive interim operating models and their respective implementation plans. The beauty of this approach is that with client journeys being a driving force for the transformation program, as I said, everything is not only looked at from the client perspective, but also is considered from end-to-end perspective, which is quite an important element. And this itself is a massive change in how this organization thinks about client and his needs. There is no me, myself, and I approach anymore, which previously all business services functions were following when applying changes to their operating models. Now, they operating models are part of the big cross-organizational strategic architecture model, and any changes they make have to fit into that bigger picture and ensure that there is no harm to the ultimate client experience. It massively helps also to ensure that any changes they make are moving them and the entire organization into that right direction, which is strategic direction that has been determined and established at the beginning of the overall digital transformation. And believe me or not, for myself, business architect, and for the rest of that organization, it has made everyone's life much, much easier. Obviously, we still discuss details. We still argue about how that strategic high-level vision should be implemented here or there. But on the end, we have that long-term view and guiding principles which help us to drive short-term execution plans with exact knowledge of the direction we all are aiming for. Client experience has been also on everyone's mind when decision regarding how exactly that strategic model should get implemented. Rather than embark on the large-scale, long-term digital transformation program, HSBC decided to go for quick, small hits to build momentum, engage clients, and to keep their interest high. And here is how Neil Cameron, a global head of corporate and institutional digital at HSBC, talked about this. We decided from the beginning that if we spend all our time and resources on engineering the pipes under the floorboards, we would lose the confidence of our customers, even if we met our objectives in the long term. We have found that a balanced portfolio of short-term, high-impact, predominantly channel-based projects, along with long-term restructuring, this is the way to go. And that's the way how things are currently being transformed in global banking and markets at HSBC. I hope you have found things we discussed today somehow interesting. If I were to try to summarize the key takeaway points from what I've been talking about, as well as key lessons learned from the ongoing HSBC digital transformation, there will be those three. First one, when transforming your processes and infrastructure, make sure it revolves around your clients. Ideally, start with a perfect client experience and let this experience, this approach, drive your transformation decision. Second one, make sure you have skills and knowledge required to deliver your transformation in the best possible way. Otherwise, you can have the best plan and vision in the words, but it will mean nothing if it can't be executed properly and on time and as promised to your clients. And the third one, last one, remember that the ultimate success criteria is your client experience and not your performance any other performance indicators. You can make your process cost effective, but again, it will mean nothing if in the same time your clients tell you they don't like that change you've just made. Obviously, you will have to aim for balance, try to balance between costs and client experience, but make sure that your driving force are exactly your clients and their experience at the end. Thank you all for your attention. It's been a pleasure to be able, as I said, to talk to you. Jose, looking forward to hear some questions.
Terrific, Artur. Thank you for sharing the journey with us. I'm looking at questions that as they are coming in. So please feel free to submit your additional questions as we have a few minutes here. The first question that came on was about just a bit of a timeline, where timeline and scope. When did HSBC? We know that some of this is part of an internal organic process that's kind of happened naturally. But at what point HSBC decided that we must have a digital strategy, and when did that started, and how was the evolution of that in the bank? And is it global? Is it regional? How is that strategy being deployed?
So obviously, HSBC was always thinking, as every huge financial organization, I guess, about how to transform itself, how to make it better, their processes more efficient, and how in all this also to look at the client experience. But I would say last year was especially important because, as I said, this is where business services within global banking and markets realize, and the management, that now it's time, and it was even before the pandemic, as I said. Now it's a high time to start really transforming everything towards making it more digital, to bring all systems siloed, massively siloed so far into the one end-to-end, let's say, journey or infrastructure, infrastructure which can support or will support end-to-end client journey. And the biggest change I could observe while working at HSBC for many years was exactly the fact that with that realization came also another huge and important element, which is that we need to think from the end-to-end client journey, and we need to start with the client journey as I said, as a driving force first. So rather than going straight into delivery phase and thinking about what and how we should integrate that existing technology infrastructure, or how to replace existing systems with perhaps better, more efficient systems, the management and all operations and the teams stopped for a moment, let us to do the work and think about, and obviously we engage them as well into this work, and let's think about what the end-to-end client journey should look like, and how all these elements and components of the overall organization should be brought together in order to make sure that the future client journey is going to be more seamless and more painful for all clients, and what exactly clients are expecting. Like, for example, to perhaps to be able to use that self-service portal rather than rely on client managers doing part of the job on their behalf or in their behalf. So there was quite a big surprise to us that clients wanted to have access to their data, wanted to be able to raise requests, wanted to be able to observe what happens with that request, and obviously producing or providing them with that portal and access to the cases they will be raising is one of the biggest answers we kind of preparing for them, or we've made already available to some of our clients. And the adoption and implementation of all these things is going to take years. So the plan, which I was talking about, that strategic vision of how our HSBC operating model is going to work, we kind of estimated that this is going to take us at least 3 years in order to first implement all required infrastructure elements and components to determine how future processes should work. what skills and resources will be required, implement and prepare all these things, and then start rolling that out across the globe, because this is a global project. So all regions, or more than 40 countries where HSBC is currently operating, will ultimately benefit from this future strategic vision.
We have a question from Gunjai. Thank you for that. We have a question from Gunjai Dave here, and he's talking about how are you working through the silos in an organization as large as HSBC? And his commentary is that what do you advise to create a massive shift towards this new culture of client centricity? And specifically, as you have large organizations that naturally have silos that form. Tell us a little bit about how you're working through all of that.
So thank you very much for this question. This is quite interesting, because we went through or personally as a business architect, I went through this pain of making sure that people could think from the broader perspective, not only, as I said, this is me and my part of the business, and I will do everything what's possible to make it better, not necessarily looking at what others are doing. So the way how I started to change that and shifting that way of thinking was to, before even that strategic vision and business architecture has been prepared, I've been asked, first of all, to determine, to come up with the service catalog, which I mentioned also during my speech. And it was quite interesting thing, because rather than taking the services and capabilities and putting them on, for example, one page in a siloed way, which is the usual way how capabilities and services are represented. Here is one part of organization, the capabilities. Here is another part of organization and its capabilities. I decided to do this slightly different way. I decided to take client journey with onboarding, maintenance, offboarding, starting from the highest level, and think about what capabilities are required in order to be able to perform onboarding, in order to be able to perform maintenance. And all of a sudden, people discover that my capabilities and my function appears not only once, but multiple different times along the client journey. That helped massively to change the way how people used to be thinking about their role and responsibilities in the entire client life cycle, as I already established, function which is just doing its job. No, it was more dynamic. It was a way of thinking where my capabilities are required, as I said, on multiple different stages of client journey. With that mindset, with that approach, it was much easier to bring everybody together and making them working on that strategic business architecture, which again was looking purely and mainly from client journey perspective, trying to understand how clients, and that's the reason why we put client on the top of that business architecture model. That's the reason why we thought about client portal, and that's the reason why we thought about orchestration layer and how to make that orchestration layer in order to make sure that everything gets coordinated, ideally in a fully automated way, but also that every interaction which will come back to the client himself will get properly coordinated, aggregated if possible, so that only necessary required interactions with client will be possible. So it was a very long time and a massive amount of work we put into that change of that mindset, but ultimately it kind of benefits the current implementation and transformation which is going on.
Good. We have time for one other quick question here from Erwin Verdok. He is actually calling in from Belgium today. And he asks, how do you deal with product ownership in such a large organizations and with all aspects like data, regulatory, channels, core banking to be covered? How do you steer from one product log, one leading product owner? So, with the time that we have here, just about a minute, the issue around product ownership, how do you deal with that in an organization that is so large?
Obviously, a project, the transformation or program itself is quite large and engages multiple different people. And this is where, as I said, also the importance of that operating model or strategic vision, I should say, comes into the picture, and it's really important because it makes massively easier for us to talk to product owners, to business stakeholders, and make sure that ultimately we're talking about exactly the same. We have some guiding principles, and everyone more or less knows what's going to happen and the direction we are heading into. This is as I said, a real help, and proves to be helpful also while exactly talking to these groups of projects or program stakeholders.
Very well. Dr. Artur Preus, a real pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time, sharing your expertise and your journey with us. It's again a real privilege and an honor to have you here. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Joseph, for an opportunity, and see you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping up this segment, and let's take a look at what comes next. We have the leader for Swiss Re providing us with a case study on building client-centric financial organizations. So Sebastian Rees, head of operational excellence at the Swiss Re, will share with us his journey on how to transition a 150-year-old company to learn new tricks, to learn a new strategic direction, and have that internal drive to pursue it. So we're going to talk about technology, we're going to talk about culture, we're going to talk about transformation. So look forward to seeing you at the top of the hour with Sebastian Rees. Thank you.